How's it going, everybody? Welcome to the 1IQ Sports Talk channel. I'm Brendan, and joining me is Sterling. And in today's little video, one of the things that we weren't able to quite talk about in our podcast that I highly recommend everyone go watch comes out every Saturday, and we are going to be changing some stuff up with that going forward. But please make sure to always check that out. And one of the conversations that we wanted to get to, but we ultimately didn't get to, was I had looked at three trades over the last couple years, and I wanted to kind of pick Sterling's brain about who really won these trades and who was the team that ultimately screwed it up the worst. And one of the trades just got even worse for a team this particular week. And if you don't know, that might have kind of already spoiled one of the trades. So the first one that I'm going to talk about here involves the Denver Broncos and the Seattle Seahawks. This happened in 20 or the offseason of 2022. And obviously, this was a historic trade because the Denver Broncos traded for quarterback Russell Wilson. They also ended up getting a pick that ultimately turned out to be pick 116 in 2022, which I believe was a fourth round pick. But however, the Seattle Seahawks in this trade, trading away Russell Wilson, they got quarterback Drew Lock, they got defensive tackle Shelby Harris, they got tight end Noah Fant, they got the ninth pick in the 2022 draft, the 40th pick in the 2022 draft, they got 145, 158, and or pardon me, I should say it was pick 9, pick 40, and pick 145, which the Seahawks used in that draft to trade away to Kansas City, and they also got pick 158 and 233, all in 2022. And in 2023, they got pick 5 and pick 37. And so here are the players that the Seattle Seahawks ended up drafting with those guys, or with those picks that they received from the Broncos. With the ninth pick, they selected tackle Charles Cross. I think that's a pretty solid pick, getting some O-line help. We all made fun of the Seahawks because as soon as they trade away Russell Wilson, they finally draft an O-lineman in the first round. With pick 40, they drafted edge rusher Boye Mafe. Again, has been a decent player for them. Pick 158, Tyreek Smith, another defensive end. Pick 233, Drake Young, wide receiver. Then going into 2023 with the fifth pick, we all know they selected Devin Witherspoon, the corner out of Illinois. And then with the 37th pick, they selected edge rusher Derek Hall. And the Seahawks, obviously, with that 2022 pick, Iomaya Uzoriki, D tackle. I butchered the hell out of that name. It's just a lot of vowels placed beside other vowels and then other words. But yeah, that was ultimately the Denver Broncos trade to get Russell Wilson.
Yeah. Yeah, that was a horrible trade. Even when it happened, people were already making fun of the Broncos for that. Like Russell Wilson, even in his prime, I think you paid too much. Denver, like that, it's just absolutely crazy. And the fact that he only played there for 2 seasons and then they cut him completely after paying him that big contract, and so they're still paying him now. And you look at the Seahawks who added all those pieces, plus they kept Noah Fant. They utilized Drew Lock and sent him to Washington to get Sam Howell.
No,
And so now,
Drew Lock came over in free agency.
what was that?
Drew Lock went over in free agency.
Oh, was it free agency?
Yeah,
I thought they traded.
the
That was part of the
Seahawks
trade.
did
Yeah,
trade for Sam Howell, but he was like
yeah,
a sixth round pick for something like that.
fair,
Yeah,
fair. But yeah, so I mean, Noah Fant is the only remaining player
from
from
that
that
trade.
trade.
Shelby Harris, I think, is in Cleveland now.
Yeah, I mean, more of a support guy, not really a starter. So that's why
Yeah,
I was more looking starters because even Russell Wilson is no longer with the Broncos.
and he's no
But yeah,
longer a starter.
it's crazy to see some of these bad trades that have been coming down the last few years.
But yeah, I just look back at this trade and I go, we knew Russell Wilson was going to get traded because
Hmm.
all of the signs pointed that his time in Seattle was kind of done. It sounded like Pete Carroll was kind of done with them, and everyone kind of already kind of had that feeling of, okay, he's likely gone. He's likely
Yeah,
going to be traded. And when the Broncos did that, they were a team that needed a quarterback. Like they were kind of that team that was, if you just have a good steady quarterback, they could compete in that AFC West, or yeah, AFC West. The problem was is that they also happened to be in a division that had Patrick Mahomes and Justin Herbert. So even when they traded for Russell Wilson, they still had the third best quarterback in the division. And at that point, after those 2 years, I would say Derek Carr was probably the better quarterback in that first year with the Broncos, because we made fun of Russell Wilson for having more bathrooms in his house than he did passing touchdowns that first season.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it was not great at all for them to make that move. And the fact that, as you said, we all knew the move was like he was getting traded. So that should have brought his trade value down. It's almost like they had the blinders on and they were like, well, this works so well with Peyton Manning. Let's do it. Let's just give them whatever they want so we can get him. We'll get another veteran just like we do with Peyton, and we'll go win a Super Bowl.
Yeah, so that is the first of the three trades that we're talking about. This next trade involves the Texans and the Browns. Obviously, the famous trade for where the Cleveland Browns traded for Deshaun Watson. They also got pick 203 in the 2024 NFL draft, which they ended up using to trade with the Broncos to get Jerry Jeudy, or they used that pick as part of a package to go get Jerry Jeudy. But the Texans ended up getting in 2022 pick 13, pick 15, or pardon me, they initially got pick 13, which they traded to Philadelphia to get pick 15, 124, 162, and 166. So at pick 15, they drafted Kenyon Green, the offensive guard, which I would say that was a pretty solid move. The next pick in this deal they ultimately had was pick 124. They used that pick to trade up in the draft. They also sent pick 64, 108, and they got pick 44, which was the pick that they used on John Mechie, the wide receiver out of Alabama. They also used pick 62, which they acquired from Philadelphia to trade up in the draft. They sent that one to Denver for pick 75, where they drafted linebacker Christian Harris. And then with pick 107, which is one that they received in this deal, they selected Dameon Pierce, the running back. Again, we talked about pick 166 being, or pardon me, they traded pick 166 along with picks 207 and for to Chicago for pick 150, where they drafted Thomas Booker, defensive tackle. Then in the next year's draft, they had pick 12, which they used and they traded up with picks 33 and the fourth or the other first round pick that they received from the Browns, and an additional third round pick. And they also got back a third and pick 105. With that third overall pick, they used to draft Will Anderson, which, he just absolutely tore up my Chicago Bears. So that was a pretty solid pick. They also received pick 73. They traded that to the Rams along with pick 161 and picks 69 and 191, or to receive picks 69 and 191. And with that 69th pick in the 2023 draft, they drafted Tank Dell. So yeah, and then picks 191 they traded to Philadelphia for picks 230 and 248. With 230 they used in a player trade, and 248 they drafted a safety, Brandon Hill. And then with obviously that 2024 first round pick, obviously they used that to go up and get Will Anderson. And with the 2024 fourth round pick, the last that they received in this, they drafted Cade Stover, the tight end out of Ohio State. And with the, again, Cleveland Browns, they got Deshaun Watson and Jerry Jeudy, and they gave Deshaun Watson fully guaranteed money, and he sucks.
Yeah. Yeah, this was definitely a worse trade than the one we talked about last. It's, and while the Texans didn't get the other pick in that 2023 draft from that trade, they also managed to grab CJ Stroud. And so they were bad enough. They ended up with the second overall pick, got CJ Stroud, traded up to get Will Anderson, as you said, and ended up with the offensive and defensive rookies of the year. And they've turned it around in a matter of a few years and are now a powerhouse in the AFC South again and look like they could be a playoff favorite for years to come. Whereas the Browns have done Browns things, as they always do. You know, they went, do we want to pay Baker Mayfield and then put a bunch of really good talent around him and maybe be competitive in this AFC North after we just knocked off the Steelers in the playoffs for the first time, I think, ever?
Yeah.
And they were riding high and they're like, nah, let's just cut Baker loose and bring in Massage Watson and see how that goes. And it has gone abysmally. He's not completed a season yet. He's lackluster. Everybody talks at the start of the season how, oh well, Joe Burrow and Lamar Jackson are the two best, but Deshaun Watson is a close third for quarterback in that division, and every year they still end up absolute garbage. They went through 5 quarterbacks last year after, including Deshaun Watson, who started it out, and wasn't until that fifth one they started rolling a little bit. It's garbage. I'm happy to see it being a Steelers fan because it just puts the Browns into this horrible limbo until his contract is over. Because, as you said, it's fully guaranteed. So they can cut him all they want. It's still going to affect their cap until the end of that contract. And so you cut him, you have one less guy, and you don't get that money back to be able to spend on somebody to replace him.
There is one clause that the Browns changed in Deshaun Watson's contract this summer that says if he gets suspended due to some of the cases, they take away a bunch of his guaranteed money and they can ultimately get out of it, which is the smart thing to do. But then again, you can't
That
you probably shouldn't have signed a guy that had like 30 plus cases against him.
Well, that's interesting that Deshaun Watson would even agree to that change, because
It's,
I mean, like, it's a contract. They can't just change it themselves without
yeah,
all parties agreeing.
I don't know exactly the full details on it, but it sounds like they had some negotiations this summer and they kind of snuck that clause in there from the sounds of things. I don't know how
Oh, okay.
truthful this is. That's just something that I've heard, but ultimately it's one of those things where if I'm the Browns, I'm trying to find any way to just get him suspended so I can be like, yeah, we don't have to pay him. We don't have to pay him. Like, yeah, yeah,
Yeah, that sounds like it might be wishful thinking on Browns fans' parts,
maybe,
something
very
like
well,
that. Yeah,
maybe.
because why? Like, why would you go? Oh, yeah, if I get suspended for this ongoing issue that you guys knew about beforehand, again, then yeah, I'll forego $100 million of the 200 and whatever that you guaranteed me. Yeah, yeah, I'm fine with that. Like, no,
Yeah,
of course
yeah.
he would.
But yeah, from the thing that I read is it says they snuck it in, and how truthful is that? Who
And
knows?
how well will it hold up anyway if it was snuck in? That's something for their lawyers to deal with if it ever comes to be.
It
Either way, being a Steelers fan, I'm happy and amused to see the Browns suffering and shooting themselves in the foot. Like if you've ever watched the movie 8 Mile, the Browns are kind of like that B Rabbit character. Just, you know, they try to load up and go for something and shoot themselves in the leg in the process because they're fucking useless.
as someone who
Um,
was a Baker Mayfield fan, it's one of those things just going, you guys could have had this if you just
yeah,
weren't a bunch of dickheads.
yep. Yeah, if they had kept Baker, I truly believe they would be competitive in this AFC North, and the Steelers finally would have been the bottom team. But they made that move, and like as soon as they did, everybody's like, "Oh, the Browns are so much better now." And I was like, "He hasn't played in a year. He's not going to play for another year. And then when he comes back, he's going to be rusty and older and slower." And that's exactly what he's been. And every week he looks worse.
Hmm.
It's I was happy with that move because I could see what Baker Mayfield was starting to build with the Browns. I was like, "Fuck, they might actually be slowly starting to get good, and I don't want this.
Yeah, and I heard a clip from a Cleveland sports talk radio show where a guy called in and he didn't even say hello. He just started reading off stats, and the guy goes, "What is this?" He goes, "That's the stats from Baker Mayfield since he's left Cleveland." And
Yeah,
then he starts
yeah,
reading off Deshaun Watson's stats, and the radio guy's like, "Get this guy!" Like, stop! Like, shut up! It's just like, dude, is he wrong? Is he
right.
wrong?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah, I think I saw that clip too, and he's like, "I'm so sick and tired of hearing about this," and it's like, well, I mean, you should be sick and tired of being a Cleveland Browns fan, man,
yeah,
because that's what they do. They start seeing something good, and they're like, "Yeah, that's too good for this city. Let's get rid of that and bring something more destructive in."
yeah,
It really is. It's at the point where you're gonna have to pay him anyway. You're gonna be stuck with it. Like, you'd be better off just letting him walk, get him out of the locker room, get him out of the city, and start looking towards your rebuild now. You've got a couple of pieces that you could potentially turn into big draft picks yourself.
hmm
It would suck to have to ship guys like Miles Garrett out, but if that's what you got to do going forward to start your rebuild in Cleveland, you need to.
yeah. No, I totally agree. That's a conversation much farther down the road for us. The last trade that I have on this list is still technically in its ongoing phase because it hasn't been fully completed. But with the news, obviously, that came out yesterday with the benching of a certain Bryce Young, the trade involves the Carolina Panthers and the Chicago Bears. Famously, the Panthers traded for the first overall pick to the Chicago or from the Chicago Bears. They traded wide receiver DJ Moore, who I'd say it's comfortably a pretty good player at this point, superstar player. The Bears got the ninth pick that they ended up trading to Philadelphia. They also got a 2024 fourth round pick. And so with that 10th pick, the Chicago Bears drafted Darnell Wright, the offensive tackle. In the draft, the Bears traded picks 136 and 156, which were some of the picks that they got from the Panthers. And they traded up, or pardon me, I should say they had pick 61, which they had from the Panthers, and they used that to trade up with picks 136 to get pick 56, where they drafted Tyreek Stevenson, the corner out of Miami. And then going to the 2024 first round pick that the Bears received, obviously that ended up being the first overall pick. They draft Caleb Williams, and that 2024 fourth round pick that the Bears received in the Philadelphia deal, they ended up selecting Tory Taylor, the punter out of Iowa, and the Bears still hold the Carolina Panthers 2025 fifth round pick, which at the moment, if everything still stays the exact same, will end up being pick 33. And the
Yep.
Panthers got Bryce Young, who isn't even starting for them anymore.
No, no. I mean, the Panthers are just another completely dysfunctional organization. Like you talk about bad trades they've made. They let guys like Cam Newton walk away for pennies. They traded away Christian McCaffrey and got almost nothing back for him. Brian Burns they traded away and got, what was it, like a fourth or something like that.
Yeah,
And
when they could have had two first rounds the year prior.
exactly, like this organization just keeps getting worse and worse. Like, at least the Browns were trying to build something. It really feels like the Panthers are just trying to be as bad as possible. Year in and year out. It's reaching a point where, like, at some point you got to step in and go, these owners are not good for this team. We need to take this team away from them because they're making it look bad. When you can go to an entire Carolina Panthers home season, like every home game, for less money than even a single ticket to pretty much every other team in the NFL's home game for a single week, and you
Yeah.
can go to every single game that the Panthers have at home.
I saw a ticket that they had for a home game this year where it was $2.
Yep.
You can go for less than a cup of coffee in Canada.
Yep. It's insanity, and like I feel for Bryce Young because you don't get to this point, you don't make it to the NFL if you don't have talent. So
Mhm.
he is a decent quarterback at the very least. He should be seeing some success, but this Panthers organization have not put him in a position where that can happen at all. And with him being benched now, if Andy Dalton goes out there and lights it up, then we could be talking about them trading Bryce Young away somewhere. And wouldn't it be just so poetic for him to get traded somewhere and then all of a sudden start being successful? I'm not talking Super Bowl quality or anything like
You're just
that,
talking
but
just having
he's
like
going to
a
throw
middle
touchdowns.
of the road quarterback.
Yeah, he's going to throw touchdowns. He's going to win games. Where at this point in Carolina, that's not even happening.
Hey, Pittsburgh Steelers. Pittsburgh
No,
Steelers.
we got Justin Fields. Justin Fields is not looking too terrible. He's looked better each week so far.
Yeah, again, I just look at this trade, and as we all know, I wasn't a fan of Bryce Young coming out of Alabama. I thought
No,
his size was going to be a problem, not his height. I don't necessarily think the height is necessarily a thing. It's his frame, the way that he plays the game. Again, he didn't have that strong of an arm, and I just looked at him and I said, this is just a recipe for disaster all around, and it has been. Again,
yeah,
a stat that came out this week. So I'll give you this stat for Caleb Williams, and then I'll give you this stat for Bryce Young. Caleb Williams, on 37 dropback or passing attempts, he was pressured 36 times. Now, it wasn't only one play where he didn't get pressured. There was multiple plays where he didn't get pressured, but there was also multiple plays where multiple guys got a pressure on that individual play. Bryce Young, out of, I think it was 29 passing attempts, do you want to know how many times he was pressured?
how many?
4.
4.
4. The least pressured quarterback in the NFL in week number 2, and he put up that performance. That is why I think Dave Canellis and the Panthers ultimately said, we can't have him playing. Because
Yeah,
if you are not facing any pressure and you throw 2 bad interceptions, have 6 points, and just look like after his second interception, he looked like he was going to cry.
yeah.
And so it's, again, you hate to see a guy just absolutely turn into a massive bust, but it's one of those things where he has worse numbers than Jamarcus Russell.
Oh, I know. It's bad, and as you said, you weren't very high on him. There were a lot of people that weren't, and he shouldn't have been the number 1 overall pick. He really is one of those guys that should have been picked behind somebody who already has a quarterback so he can learn
Sit
the
back,
system and
learn.
become a system quarterback.
Mhm.
Like it's one of those situations where so many times I talk about it where these quarterbacks are drafted and thrown right into a starting position when you're setting them up for failure in that situation. We've seen so much more success from quarterbacks when they can sit behind someone and learn a system and learn the game a little bit more before coming in than we do with guys who are thrown out there week 1 in their rookie season. We see so many more busts that way, and that's why I think over the years we've started seeing more and more busts.
I think either way, you'll see busts and then you'll see success stories.
Yeah.
You know me. I don't think there is a perfect way to, ultimately have a quarterback. The quarterback position is the hardest position in the world to scout because you could have all the talent in the world and have the pieces around you, and you just can't get that spot. It doesn't matter if you sat for 3 years behind someone. It doesn't matter if you started right away. There's arguments to be made both ways. Because again, people always say, "Oh, look at Tom Brady, Aaron Rodgers, Mahomes," and then you can also go, "Well, look at Peyton Manning and Joe Burrow." Like
Yep.
these are guys that started right away and were super successful. Even Ben Roethlisberger. I will
Hmm.
always go back. He missed the first 3 games. Okay, then what did he do for the rest of the year? Just casually
Yeah.
went 13-0, and I believe he made it to an AFC Championship game.
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, so
Yeah. No, I get what you mean.
it's not a perfect strategy, but ultimately
No.
looking at these 3 trades, obviously the Bears trade with the Panthers, it isn't finished yet, so we'll see what they are ultimately going to get with that pick if they trade it away, what they're going to do with it. I kind of have a feeling I know which one I think is the worst trade out of the three, but I'm curious to see which one you think is the worst trade out of the three.
I mean, for me, hands down, it's that Browns Texans trade is the worst of the three because it was the most expensive as well. Like, yes, the Broncos also paid Russell Wilson, but they didn't pay him what Deshaun Watson got. And that's what it is, and that's why that the Bears Panthers is even a distant third for me in how bad the trade is because at least they haven't lost money in the process. Yes, they lost time, they lost talent, and they're losing money in revenue from ticket sales and things like that. But they didn't lose guaranteed money in paying a guy that is not doing anything to make your organization any better in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah, I
And that
totally
is why
agree. I
the
think
Browns.
the Bears have the third worst in this option. It's one of those things where it just, since it's so recent and it's just making so much news as it continues to go on, go on, go on, it's just one of those things where it's kind of more recency bias of going, oh my God, like it just keeps getting worse. Like we all
Yeah.
thought it was bad when the trade was made. And then last year, we're like, how can this possibly get worse for the Panthers? And now we're all sitting back going, oh, it actually could somehow get worse for the Panthers, benching
Yep.
him after 18 games of play. I agree
Oh
with
yeah.
you. I think it's probably the Texans, then the Broncos, because again, you just look at what the Texans got.
Yeah.
Sure, they didn't use the pick that they got from the Browns to get CJ Stroud, but they were put in a position of where they looked at and went, we feel comfortable drafting CJ Stroud, who can be our new franchise quarterback, but we're also going to use the ammo that we got from the Cleveland Browns to go up
Hmm.
and get the superstar defensive end that we've kind of needed since JJ Watt left. And you when you look at the Seahawks, kind of the things that they've gotten an okay tackle in the league. They've gotten a really talented young corner in the
Hmm.
league, but other than that, I wouldn't say this trade ultimately set the Seahawks up in such a way that they are massively over succeeding in the league like what we're seeing with the Texans.
Yeah, I have to agree there, and we might see that with the Bears where more success starts to come and it might sway that trade a little bit higher. I still don't think at any point that will be, no matter how bad it gets for the Panthers, I don't think it can get worse than what it was for the Browns, unfortunately. And yeah, the Seahawks, they did a few good things, but they didn't get as much firepower as those other two teams from that trade. If anything, it was more of that was a win for them because they were able to move Russell Wilson out and get something.
Yes.
Because the writing was on the wall. Russell Wilson was leaving, so they very easily could have ended up in a position where Russell Wilson just walked, and they got absolutely nothing for him.
Well,
So,
just imagine this: if Russell Wilson would have stayed that 1 year and had the similar year that he had in Denver, no
mhm,
one would have touched him. They would have just been like, "That's your problem, Seattle. That's not ours. We all know that you want to try to move on from him. We'll give you a sixth if you'll
yeah,
take that." But then, like, yeah, so insane couple of trades that we just kind of all sit back at and kind of laugh at the teams that ultimately did the trades, because as Bears fans, we're laughing at Panthers fans every single day. As Texans fans, they're laughing at Browns fans every day, and as Seahawks fans, they're laughing at Broncos fans every single day. It's always
yep.
nice to have a team that you're a fan of that you can just look at and laugh at. I know for Steelers fans, they're kind of looking at that almost like the Chase Claypool trade.
Yeah. Well, what I would say is the rest of the league, if you're not a fan of those three teams, you're still laughing at those three losing teams on the side of that. So like Panthers, Broncos, and Browns are kind of laughing stocks right now because of that around the league.
Mm-hmm. It really is. But that is all for this video. For Sterling, I'm Brendan saying thank you all very much for watching. Make sure to like and subscribe and comment on the video. It all really helps out. But till next time, for us, we're saying peace.